It's called the Voynich Manuscript, named after the book dealer who rediscovered it in 1912. But its story goes back much, much further. Look at this. Strange plants that botanists can't identify. Astronomical charts that don't match any known sky. Naked women bathing in green liquid connected by tubes. And page after page of text in an alphabet no one has ever seen. Carbon dating proves it's from the 1400s. That means someone 600 years ago either created an entirely new language or recorded something in a language we've lost. The question is, were they a genius, a madman, or did they know something we don't? Let's start at the beginning.
It began in 1912. In the dim corridors of a Jesuit college near Rome, a rare book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich was sorting through forgotten manuscripts. Among dusty Latin volumes and theological treatises, he found a single chest wrapped in rotting leather. Inside, a book unlike any other. Its cover was cracked, its pages yellowed by centuries, but the ink still glowed faintly brown, as though freshly written. The text flowed in graceful looping lines, but in a language belonging to no civilization known to man. Alongside the text were hundreds of illustrations, strange botanical drawings of plants no botanist could identify, women bathing in pools connected by pipes and stars, and maps of the heavens that matched no known constellation. Voynich stared at it for hours, realizing he might be holding the world's only undeciphered book. He brought it back to London, and the whispers began. Scholars argued it was written by Roger Bacon, the medieval genius rumored to dabble in forbidden sciences. Others claimed it was the work of a secret alchemist, encoding lost formulas to create life. But as experts examined the manuscript, confusion deepened. The letters followed patterns, yet broke every linguistic rule. Words repeated, but never made sense. Sentences flowed beautifully, like poetry written by someone who understood rhythm, but not meaning. Cryptographers from England, Germany, and America all tried. None succeeded. Some went mad chasing it. Even the British Admiralty, whose codebreakers later cracked German Enigma, couldn't find a single word they could translate. One of them wrote in his final report, "This manuscript makes no sense because it was never meant to." As the years passed, the book changed hands again and again, from collectors to priests, from universities to vaults. Each owner was certain they would be the one to break it. Each failed. And the Voynich manuscript waited, silently, as if laughing at every attempt to understand it. Some began to wonder, if a book resists reading for 6 centuries, does it still exist to be read? Or is it something else entirely?
Every book has a story, but this one has a trail of ghosts. After Wilfrid Voynich's discovery, the manuscript began its silent journey through history once again, passing from one obsessed collector to another like a cursed relic. The earliest known record traces it to the Jesuit order. For decades, it had been hidden in the archives of Villa Mondragone, a place whispered about by scholars as a refuge for forbidden texts. The priests there knew of its existence, but refused to open it. Some said the script was demonic. Others feared the church had locked it away to suppress knowledge that could challenge divine order. But even before the Jesuits, the book's trail grew colder. A letter found inside its pages hinted that it once belonged to Emperor Rudolph II of Bohemia, the eccentric ruler who filled his Prague castle with astrologers, magicians, and alchemists. Rudolph allegedly purchased it for 600 gold ducats, believing it had been written by the English monk Roger Bacon. After Rudolph's death, the manuscript passed to a physician named Jakub Horczycki de Tepenich. His name, still faintly visible, burned into the first page. He was the imperial alchemist, a man rumored to experiment with immortality. When he died, the book vanished again. 2 centuries later, it resurfaced in the hands of Georg Baresch, a Prague alchemist who confessed in letters to being tormented by this script that mocks understanding. He sent copies of the pages to the Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher in Rome, a man obsessed with decoding Egyptian hieroglyphs. Kircher tried, failed, and kept the original letters, the very correspondence that would centuries later guide Voynich to the Jesuit archives where he found the book. A perfect circle. The manuscript had waited, patiently, for its next victim.
Every person who held it believed they were chosen to unveil its secret, but one by one they faded into obscurity. Voynich died without ever learning the truth. His widow sold the book to a rare book dealer, who then passed it to Hans Kraus, a Viennese collector. Kraus tried to sell it to universities, museums, even private kings of Europe. No one wanted it. "It brings bad luck," one curator wrote. Finally, Kraus donated it to Yale University in 1969, sealing it inside the Beinecke Rare Book Library, a modern fortress of glass and steel. There, under controlled light and perfect temperature, the book rests, as if waiting for another century to pass before it speaks again. Today, scholars can examine its high-resolution scans. They can analyze the ink, the parchment, even the wormholes. But the text remains as impenetrable as the day it was written. Some say its authorship doesn't matter, that the true mystery is how it survived. Fire, war, religion, time, none have destroyed it. Perhaps the book endures because it wants to. A vessel of something that refuses to die.
Language is the most human of inventions. It is how we bind thoughts to symbols and symbols to memory. But the Voynich Manuscript speaks a language that refuses to be human. It was named Voynichese, an invented tongue with rules that defy comprehension. At first glance, it looks like real writing. Graceful, fluid strokes arranged from left to right, divided into paragraphs, punctuated with consistency. But there are no recognizable alphabets, no punctuation, no numbers. Every letter appears familiar, yet alien, like the echo of a forgotten dialect. Linguists began to treat it like any other ancient code. They mapped letter frequencies, searched for patterns, and compared them to known languages, Latin, Hebrew, Sanskrit, even Old Arabic. But none matched. The words were too structured to be random, yet too meaningless to belong to any language on Earth. In the 1940s, cryptographers from the British and American intelligence services, the same men who cracked Nazi codes, examined it under secrecy. Their verdict? If this is a cipher, it is unlike any we have ever seen. The pages themselves are divided into strange sections, one part filled with botanical drawings, plants that do not exist, another filled with astronomical charts, suns, moons, and circular star maps. Others show women bathing in pools connected by pipes, as though plumbing the cosmos itself. The illustrations seem to follow a logic, but a logic that belongs to another mind entirely. A few researchers noticed something chilling. The script flows effortlessly, like someone writing from instinct, suggesting the author truly understood this language. It wasn't random symbols or imitation. It was coherent thought, just not ours.
The letters repeat in cycles, forming patterns that mimic grammar. Some words appear only in certain sections, as though each chapter had its own dialect. When computers analyzed the frequency of repetition, they found a rhythm similar to natural languages like Italian or English. Yet the meanings led nowhere. It was as if a mirror of meaning had been shattered, and we could only see the fragments. In 2013, researchers applied entropy analysis, a mathematical model that measures complexity in human writing. The result? Voynich's behaves like a real language, but one without a key. It was not random noise, but it was also not possible to translate. Some believed the author created an entirely private language, an experiment to test the limits of communication itself. Others whispered that it might be a transcription of transwriting, messages written by a hand guided by something unseen. The ink and parchment tell us it was written between 1404 and 1438, but the ideas on its pages, the spiral diagrams, the alien anatomy, feel centuries ahead of that time. Even the pigments are unusual. Modern chemical analysis found traces of minerals not commonly used in European inks of the era, suggesting it was crafted by someone with access to exotic materials, someone educated, someone deliberate. And yet, nowhere in the book does the author sign their name. Every word was written by an invisible hand. There is no title, no date, no dedication, only pure text and imagery, perfectly balanced, as if the writer feared the contamination of identity. Historians call it the ultimate act of anonymity, the idea that the text itself should exist independent of its creator, eternal, untraceable, untouchable. Some think this was intentional, a safeguard against persecution during the Inquisition. Others believe it was spiritual, that the book's knowledge was never meant for individuals, but for the collective unconscious. Whatever the truth, the result is the same. A language that seems alive, yet resists translation. A voice that speaks, but cannot be heard. And perhaps in that silence lies the true message of the Voynich Manuscript. Not what it says, but why it refuses to speak.
Every age has its obsession. In ours, it is artificial intelligence. In the past, it was alchemy. But beneath both lies the same desire, the hunger to decode the universe. And nothing feeds that hunger quite like a mystery that refuses to die. For more than 600 years, the Voynich Manuscript has been a mirror for human obsession, reflecting back our faith, our science, and our madness. The first to fall under its spell were the scholars of the Renaissance. They believed the manuscript was a book of nature, a lost compendium that explained the hidden mechanisms of life itself, an encyclopedia of the cosmos written in a sacred tongue. To them, it wasn't nonsense. It was revelation, if only they could read it. One 15th-century physician described the text as a ladder to the heavens disguised in ink. Another called it the alphabet of God's garden. But centuries passed and the ladder never reached the sky. Then came the Enlightenment. Reason, empiricism, proof. The mystical gave way to mathematics. The book was stripped of divinity and given to the cryptographers. They saw in its pages not a holy language, but a code, one perhaps used by spies or secret societies. In Prague, alchemists tried to extract gold from its symbols. In London, mathematicians tried to measure its syntax like a hidden cipher. In every case, the result was the same: failure. Not because the code was too advanced, but because it might never have existed at all. Some began to whisper that the Voynich Manuscript was a hoax. perhaps created by a brilliant fraud to impress a foolish king. After all, Emperor Rudolph II, who once owned it, paid a fortune for anything that seemed magical. Maybe someone simply gave him what he wanted, a book that looked divine. But that theory collapses on its own perfection. If it was a hoax, why is every letter consistent? Why are the proportions so natural, the grammar so self-referential? No con artist would waste decades creating a language that obeys the laws of linguistics, yet says nothing.
A true forger leaves fingerprints of carelessness, but this author left only precision. The cipher theory gained new life during the Second World War, when Allied codebreakers, masters of Enigma and Sagaba, turned their eyes to the manuscript. They used frequency analysis, permutation tables, even custom-built mechanical decipherers. For months, they treated it as an enemy transmission, a language of the unknown. And when all results failed, one analyst simply wrote in his report, "This is not human encryption. It is something else." In 1958, a decryption team from the NSA reopened the investigation, feeding early punch card computers thousands of text fragments. Patterns emerged, then collapsed. Words repeated like dreams. Grammar appeared, then vanished. The final printout contained one haunting line. It imitates intelligence. That phrase would echo for decades. Because what does it mean for something to imitate intelligence? Is it a language pretending to be human, or humanity pretending to understand itself? As computers advanced, so did our hope. In the 21st century, AI models trained on billions of words attempted to decode the Voynich Manuscript. Neural networks scanned its symmetry, sentence lengths, curvature of letters, and transitions between symbols. Some claimed breakthroughs, that the text might be an extinct Proto-Romance dialect, or that it encoded herbal remedies for forgotten illnesses. But each translation contradicted the next. The book mocked even machines. In 2018, a Canadian linguist fed the text through an AI trained on 400 languages. The program returned phrases like, "She made recommendations to the priest," and "he spoke to the king in the Garden of Children." Beautiful words, but random. Like dreams stitched together by probability, not meaning. The scientists called it an illusion of sense. Others proposed stranger theories, that the manuscript was an attempt to communicate with the divine, written in a trance state where logic dissolved. Or perhaps, they said, it wasn't a message to us at all. Perhaps it was written for itself, a closed circuit of thought, a linguistic organism that sustains its own existence through structure alone, a living language without meaning. Think about that.
We create language to connect, to bridge the abyss between minds. But what if someone long ago discovered the true understanding was impossible, and instead built a language that only mirrors the act of trying? That would make the Voynich Manuscript the purest expression of despair ever written, the moment when communication collapses into art. And yet, not all theories are so grim. Some believe the manuscript hides ancient science, early microbiology, astronomical cycles, and coded diagrams of the human body disguised as stars and plants. They argue the book contains lost knowledge, once suppressed by religious authorities. To them, the mystery isn't failure, it's protection. The book's silence keeps its wisdom safe from corruption. But whether it's divine or delusional, every person who stares too long into it begins to change. Cryptographers describe the moment of collapse, when they stop seeing letters and start seeing motion, when words dissolve into living patterns, when the mind starts hearing meaning where there is none. They call it the Voynich effect.
The line between logic and hallucination becomes thin, and many have crossed it. One researcher, after decades of study, burned every note he had and wrote, "The book reads you." It's possible he was right, because when a mystery survives centuries untouched by science, it stops being a puzzle and becomes a mirror. The Voynich Manuscript is no longer about who wrote it or what it says. It's about us, our need to conquer mystery, to label the unknowable, to prove that everything can be solved. But maybe, just maybe, the author knew something we don't, that knowledge itself can destroy those unready to hold it, that some books aren't meant to reveal, but to test. A test of patience, a test of sanity, a test of the human spirit facing the infinite silence of the unknown. Every generation believes it will be the one to solve it. Every generation fails. And still, the book waits, quietly, patiently, for another century of obsession.
What if the Voynich Manuscript was never meant to be read? What if the words on its pages were not meant to tell, but to remind? For centuries, humanity has treated mystery as an enemy, something to conquer, to measure, to strip of its power. But perhaps some truths do not die in darkness because they belong there. When you stare at the Voynich Manuscript long enough, something strange begins to happen. The symbols no longer feel foreign. You start to see patterns, not in the pages, but in yourself. The book becomes mirror. Every page reflects a part of the reader, the scientist who demands proof, the dreamer who believes in magic, the skeptic, the mystic, the child who once believed that the stars could speak. Maybe that's why no one has ever deciphered it, because there is nothing to decipher. The book isn't a message, it's a question. A question whispered across 600 years. Do you still believe you can know everything? That is its forbidden truth, not what it hides, but what it reveals about us. The ink may have faded, the parchment may have cracked, but its silence remains perfect. In a world drowning in information, the Voynich Manuscript is the last sanctuary of mystery, a reminder that not all knowledge was meant to be possessed and not every secret should be understood. Perhaps the true author was not a monk nor an alchemist, but time itself, writing a story that only eternity can read. And maybe the book still waits for someone who won't try to translate it, but to listen to it. Because there are things older than language, older than science, older than reason, and they whisper to us in silence. The Voynich Manuscript remains closed, as it has for 600 years, and still the world gathers around it, not to read, but to remember. Some mysteries are not puzzles, they are mirrors, and this one, perhaps, reflects the oldest truth of all, that to be human is to seek meaning even where there is none.